Okay, so we are going to do kind of a spontaneous video here. Um,
This is very unplanned. We have been doing taxes and house cleaning and everything else, hence the wild hair. We are we were not expecting to do a video today. So,
but I happen to be sitting down. Tiffany has her computer usually. She sits kind of behind me in a chair, and she usually does laptop things, so it's more mobile. Anyways, I sat at my desk, and I happen to be watching, I think it's the 2020 annual meeting, and discussing the new teaching tool. I don't know if it's a book or a brochure yet. I didn't even get that far. But it's the Enjoy Life Forever. No doubt it will replace the Bible Teach book, which replaced the Knowledge book and whatever else. But it's called the Enjoy Life Forever, which seems to me just a recycled name, at least in name. uh, Live Forever in Paradise book. I'm, seems like kind of the same. Anyway, uh, I didn't even get into it very far because right off the bat, a woman comes onto the screen. And just to catch you up, I'm not very good at remembering names or connecting people, who's related to who, and whatever else. It sort of kind of goes in one ear and out the other type of a thing. Tiffany's really good at that.
I never forget. I shouldn't say never. I hardly ever forget a person or their name, if especially if I've met them.
Yeah, and for me, it's like I said, in one ear, out the other. So I will get these stories and never relate them to who they are, who's connected to who, or whatever else. So all I remember is this story that Tiffany would tell me about. Maybe you can even tell the story
Yeah.
about this woman. What she told me about this woman anyway.
Okay. I remember her. This is like 25 years ago. So you have to imagine this woman being 25 years younger, dressing very sexy at the hall, purposefully getting up during the meeting, and some would say in a sexy way to go to the restroom, so you'd have to like walk through the auditorium in
So
order to
not
use
when
the
the
restroom.
song while everybody else is doing it, but the way she told to me is that this woman would get up during the part, and made sure she was sitting near the front so that way she could get up and flaunt her whatever
Her
on her way,
assets.
her assets, back to the bathroom, and then come back in during the part and flaunt her assets to sit back down. That's the story I know. And then we see this woman, and we'll say her name because, hey, you put yourself out there on the broadcast, you're going to get the scrutiny. What was her name?
Sherry Bailey.
Sherry Bailey comes on the screen, and Tiffany about jumps out of her seat behind me at her computer and says, "That's Sherry Bailey. That's."
And
And
I
then
went
she
off.
goes off and she says, "That's the
My
woman I told you about who who does this flaunting her assets."
and this has just been a few minutes ago, so my stomach is and my heart are still a little fluttery because I'm just kind of irritated at the fact that of all the people in the organization, she's on the screen. And maybe that shouldn't be said, but it's like maybe after I tell you a little bit of the story about what I know about her and her family, she is from my home congregation in North Idaho. This is not our congregation where we got married, my home congregation where I was raised. And
By her aunt and uncle,
yes. And
who is an elder, actually the coordinator of the body elders now,
my
which
uncle is
starts
now.
to play into this. Now, I don't necessarily know all these, but Tiffany will reveal them. Go ahead.
Okay, so there can be lots of stories linked with this one particular story. I don't even know how to start this story right now. Which tangent should I start with? She was married. She was married.
Who is she?
Okay, she is an elder's daughter.
So she's the daughter of an elder
Who was the coordinator while I was growing up. And this coordinator, and I don't want to reveal anybody else's name except hers because her name has already been publicized through the broadcast or through the annual meeting. So I won't reveal anybody else's name, my family's name, her family's name, anything
So
else.
this is the old coordinator.
Yes.
Mind you, that there is a huge strife situation in their congregation when the old coordinator gets into politics. The old coordinator gets removed because he's getting older.
Yeah, he's getting quite old.
And good guy as far as I know. I've never had any problems with him. But her uncle,
my uncle,
ends up becoming coordinator.
Is now a coordinator.
And now is having to deal with, now as in when we were still discussing things with him, all the problems and the politics that happen in the elder body because now that guy's not the coordinator anymore. So there's this power struggle that goes on behind the scenes. Anyway, we'll leave that part at that without any details. So this is the daughter of that guy.
The coordinator when I was a child. Yes. Well, yes and no.
Yes and no.
This is going to sound really crazy. It's not really his daughter. His wife, which is actually her mother, like fleshly mother, was married to this coordinator's brother. I think he died or something happened in that marriage. I'm almost positive he died. And then Sherry's mother married the brother.
Like brother-in-law marriage type of a thing?
Yes, kind of like that. Yes.
Except for, wait a minute. So that's her uncle?
Yes. So her uncle now is her uncle and her dad married her.
I think there's a song about this. I am my own grandpa.
Okay, so, and that really, I think it's a noble thing when somebody steps up to the plate to be a dad.
Yeah.
Fine, that's fantastic.
Just poking fun. Poking fun.
And I think it's good. So, how do I get back to this story now?
Heck, you can marry your cousin in 50 of the states, so.
Yeah, really?
Yeah. Here's a funny story. It's a side tangent.
Can we not?
My cousin.
Can we not?
Or my step aunt and uncle were cousins. They got married. We had to go to Canada even to have their wedding or go to their wedding because they had to get married in Canada because in the state we were living in Idaho, they weren't allowed to do that. So anyway, just a side tangent of education for your Jeopardy purposes.
Let's get back. Come on, rein it in. So, like I said, she's from my home congregation. Her brother, her fleshly brother, has children my age. There's, how do I say this? As a lot of congregations are, they're made up of just a few families, and then they sort of like marry one another. That's the way this congregation is. So
lots of inbreeding going on.
It's kind of tribal that way, you know?
That way.
So she was married before, and I'm not sure what happened to that marriage, but she was married to an elder. And it was
so to be fair, now anything you say from this point forward, you know only through the congregation grapevine rumor mill.
I know through the congregation rumor mill and the fact that my aunt is married to an elder. So the chances of some of these things being accurate, who am I kidding?
We were at a congregation. No, we were at a congregation, and we told this story once in Grand Forks, just visiting. A guy gets disfellowshipped, just happens to be announced while we're there. No lie, within 5 minutes of the ending, an elder's wife tells us, well, he just couldn't handle his drinking.
Where's the confidentiality?
What confidentiality? So take it with a grain of salt that it comes from the rumor mill, but those of us that know the rumor mill know how the rumor mill goes. So
yeah, so and that's
this is going to be rumor mill, but at the same time, so you've got to take it with that grain of salt and understanding. So may be accurate, may not be. That's part of the confidentiality game they like to play. They don't really put the real facts out there. They just keep everybody guessing. And usually those guesses come through the elders' wives.
Yeah, and I'd like to say that I didn't hear the story right from Sherry's mouth. If she'd like to contact us through unassignedvlog@gmail.com and tell me the actual story if she ever sees this video, fine, I'll straighten the video. And or you know what, you could be a guest right on our channel and tell your story right
That's
now.
gonna happen.
I mean, she gets on the broadcast. Why can't she get on here?
Yeah, because she'll get DF for getting on here.
Well, you know, people make mistakes. People do all kinds of things all of the time.
Yeah. So anyway, let's go on with the story. So
Okay.
what are you talking about? So let's.
So she was married. So here her dad is an elder. Uncle is an elder, coordinator, actually was been presiding overseer, which would have been changed to
Coordinator later on.
Coordinator, yes. And then she was married to an elder. And like I said, all the while acting all sexy at the hall. And something happened in their marriage. I don't know if it was adultery. I don't know if he committed adultery. I don't know if she did.
What was the rumor in the congregation?
The rumor was that she did.
So she was the one being given the cold shoulder in the congregation.
But her husband, which was the elder, was disfellowshipped, and he was gone.
Okay.
He left. He was never at the hall anymore. He was gone. And
well, why would he be disfellowshipped if she was the one who committed adultery?
And I don't know why.
Okay.
That's a really good question. I don't know why. But it wasn't too long after that. She was with somebody else. She'd moved out of the area. And, you know, within a few more years, she had children or whatever.
But never come back.
Had a family. But what do you mean never come back?
You said she'd never come back.
She'd never come back. And I'm not saying come back to the organization. I'm saying come back up to the congregation to visit her parents, maybe come to visit her parents, but never come to the meetings. I never saw her at the meeting like ever again. Because
you had a run-in with her what? Go ahead, sorry.
Well, I had a run-in with her at a convention, I think it was, and I asked her. She'd never done anything to me, and I was just a young girl making friends kind of thing, and I remember her giving me her address so I could write her, because back then we didn't have cell phones, we didn't text, we didn't have social media like we do now. And she said, I'll only give it to you if you promise to write me. And I said, oh, I promise. And I think I wrote her once, or maybe not, I don't remember. and then I just lost her. You know, I moved around a lot, so a lot of the things that I had got shuffled around. They got thrown away. I don't know what happened. And it was like years later.
So what was the point of you writing her? Or
you know, I just remembered there was a lot of people that felt really bitter towards her, and I think a lot of people can identify with this, that congregations are very cliquey, and especially if you have
that congregation is really cliquey.
Yeah, especially when you have families involved, because then it can get really dividing, because not only is it a clique, but now you're talking family, and so then you get all that emotion involved too. And so I just remember a lot of people were bitter towards her and were mean to her, and I just wanted to be her friend, because I didn't really know what was going on. Nobody tells you the truth. Nobody tells you what's really going on. But at that time, she wasn't disfellowshipped, and I don't ever recall, and I could be wrong, but I don't ever recall hearing an announcement saying this person was publicly reproved or disfellowshipped. So I don't remember if she was. I remember the elder husband was disfellowshipped because he's gone, and he's always been gone. He's never come back to the organization. Mm-hmm. I guess why I was a little bit irritated, like seeing her, was usually they want people that are either on stage at a convention or an assembly to be an example and to really have sort of a squeaky clean background. Or if you are such a kiss ass, then they'll use you on stage. And I just feel like she does not have a squeaky clean background. So is it the other? I don't know. Why is she being used? And I don't want to question someone's motives that way, because I think it's nice to be valued, but are you really valued?
Yeah, valued in the extent of where we can use you to that degree.
So I don't want to be accusational or unfair to somebody. But like I said, I just feel like when they want to use somebody in the organization to have, like I said, a squeaky clean background, to not have what's what they say. You need to be beyond reproach.
Yeah.
Don't give anybody a reason to point the finger.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it's like, you have plenty of people pointing the finger at you.
So in your
maybe not the accusational way of like maybe you did something wrong, but you had a marriage fall apart, and maybe that's not her fault. But yeah, it is. It takes two to have a marriage.
so seeing her on the broadcast back in your home congregation, what kind of reaction is that going to be for people? Not in public, because obviously that's going to be totally different, but
You mean
their
like
own personal reactions
yeah,
to that,
yeah.
to seeing that.
I think some people that felt bitter towards her, seeing her on the broadcast, as disgusting as it sounds, they'll like be really embraceful. Is that a word? Like, oh, welcome back, we love you, or
now
like
that you're being touted, we
all
love
is
you
well
too.
in our land. Is it
Yeah.
well in yours?
Right.
And while some people will be like vomit in their mouth, they will still hold that in their heart, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and like I said, I don't know the full story. I wasn't in those elders meetings. I was not in their marriage or in any conversation. I don't know. But I know that there was a lot of bittered people there.
That's kind of odd. That's kind of odd. It would seem like it's not as cut and dry as simply him committing adultery on her. If there's some sort of congregational animosity towards her.
Mm-hmm.
At least I would think.
Like I said, nothing is one-wayed.
Right. Well,
in my opinion,
can be. It can be.
It can be, but I'm saying most of the time.
Yeah.
It's not just one-wayed. A person doesn't just all of a sudden have a happy relationship, and then the next day,
they're off cheating on them.
Well, they just fall into someone's pants. I mean, It just doesn't happen that way. It does not happen that way.
Yeah.
It's like a gradual, I'm falling out of love with you. You're having marital problems. You're having money issues. You're having emotional disconnect. You're having something go astray.
But
something go wrong in your relationship before there is a separation or an adulterous situation.
But even so, that's usually things that happen behind the scene, and in the congregation, no one is going to have animosity toward the one who was the victim of the adultery. Yeah. So in other words, in order to have animosity in the congregation toward the supposed victim, even if she was the victim, let's say she was, there must have been more going on.
I would assume there was. But again, I don't know that.
Yeah.
I don't know that. And you have to understand the dynamics of this congregation. It's like I said, there was like 3 pretty good major families in there that had children, and then they had children. So you're talking like 3 generations of like 3 different families and marrying each other kind of thing. Plus other people, too.
So then you've got the familial dynamics inside of the marriages and...
So depending on who you are in the congregation, you may even be a victim, but it doesn't even matter because you've got pedigree and you've got...
You can be the perpetrator and still get off because your family is the hierarchy.
I mean, you can even have somebody who is a pedophile and not have...
Sure.
I mean...
Right.
It can get crazy. So
interesting.
Anyway, it's just a little blurb, I guess.
So closing thoughts as far as your gut reaction, your visceral reaction to seeing her pop up there was...
Like my initial gut reaction?
Yeah, your
of all the people in the whole organization in the United States, that's who you picked? That was my gut reaction. Yeah. Because I know a lot of squeaky clean backgrounds
are out there.
Yeah, I'll just put it there that way. Where there's no dirt. There's no dirt. You know, two people get married when they're 18. They're married for decades and decades and decades. They don't have any problems. Why not use those people?
Maybe they're getting more and more rare.
And, you know, and the other thing is that, again, like I said, not to be accusational. People make mistakes. People change. People do the right thing, whatever. But this is different when we're talking the organization, because they want to equate themselves with God. And having parts on the broadcast, or having parts even at
especially on the annual
even
meeting.
at a convention or at a meeting. Well, at a meeting's different, but like you're used as a more of an example. It just raises eyebrows at that situation. Does that make sense?
No.
Like, that's who you're using? That's what I mean.
So let's say somebody says, well, what are you so worried about it for? What are you worked up about it for? What's the big deal?
Yeah, and I thought about that when I was sort of setting up a little bit, like, you know, what do you care so much? So what? She's on the broadcast, on the annual meeting or whatever. And it's not like I care. I really don't care. And I don't mean to sound so invested in the organization and what they're doing. But it's just the hypocrisy, I guess. You know, when you know that the people that are being used in those interviews are supposed to be examples, and yet there is a lot of people in the organization that can be used as an example, but because they have circumstances that don't allow them to be born elders' daughters, or to be pioneers, or to go to ski school, or to go to Gilead, or to you know, to do any of those school things, and yet they would have a squeaky clean background, but because they don't kiss tail and because they have a life, they're not used in that capacity. So to me, it's not really that I'm upset that she's there. It's the hypocrisy the nepotism, and the fact that they'll, I don't know. It's like they pick the beautiful people. You know what I mean? What they consider beautiful people in the organization has to do with your position, where you come from, your pedigree, how much ass kissing you do, and what position you have. That's what they consider beautiful. Not your heart condition, not the fact that you have integrity, not the fact that you are a loving person, not the fact that you are humble, but it's all the other things that are showy that they really care about. They don't care about you as a person. They care about your show. They care about your facade. They care about the fact that, and even when you get into trouble and they say, no, don't tell anybody, this is confidential. Never mind the fact that it's not really confidential. But that they want you to shut up about whatever situation you've got, because they can control, well, like we talked about in the video, they control the narrative, they control the show, they control what's said, they control what's done. And if they want to punish you in a certain way, they'll do that. If they want to uphold you in a certain way, they'll do that. Does that make sense? Do I sound angry? I'm not angry. I'm just like surprised at the hypocrisy.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of an interesting thing when there's somebody that you know the circumstance, the background of, and like I said, for me, I very little remember people or their circumstance anyways, so it doesn't near hit the same way. Obviously, you don't want to be vindictive in the sense of you're jealous for someone else being given accolades for their achievements, if you want to call it that. Not that, but that's what's funny about the organization. It's not about your achievements or what you've done or the work that you've necessarily done. It's how much you butt kiss. Mm-hmm. Because if you do the scriptural thing, and we you know, you were talking about individuals who have a good family life and whatever else, but they don't have all that nepotistic position, blah blah blah, background or lineage in the organization, and they're not used at all. And in fact, sometimes they're thrown away. A lot of times they're thrown away. And we railed against that. we totally railed against
Yeah,
that, even as
we
pioneers.
did.
When we were pioneering, and they'd come up to you and say,
Welcome to the club.
"Welcome to the club." It's not a club.
Yeah.
Um, so the whole idea that they hold up those who just do what the butt kissing, the sycophant thing is. I can see the irritation, the righteous indignation in that. I just don't want it to come across as being upset at an individual who you admit didn't really do anything wrong to you
No,
personally.
no, no. And I'm not invested in Sherry per se. It's just the whole spectrum of it. No, given that I know the background of this girl, I know her family, I know all her family. I know her parents, I know her siblings, I know her ex-husband, I know her nieces and nephews that I went to school with. I know all her family. And I know how they are, and I know how cliquey they are, and I know how mean they can be.
But that at the same time, that would go to them being angry at her, perhaps, in that congregation.
Yeah, and not being, what do you mean, like mean to me because of her?
No, in that congregation, because you talked about her being treated poorly in the congregation. How much of it was that?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just telling the story as far as I know a lot of background, and that can kind of feed a little bit more emotionally. But like I said, I don't really care about, like I said, her as a person. I'm happy for her, whatever she wants to do to her life. That's great for her. I don't care. But it's like I said, it's just the hypocrisy of why not pick somebody who is not serving, who is really a nobody in the congregation to do something like that, who puts their 20 minutes in and it's all they can do. Why not use them? And I guess that was always kind of an irritation. Even as a pioneer, we'd be used on the stage, and it's like, why can't we give such and such a person an opportunity to do that?
Yeah.
Well, because you're pioneering and we need to put you on the stage. Well, I don't want to be on stage. I've just spent 8 hours all day out in service. I don't want to be on stage. I want to sit here and veg out at the meeting.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, I guess. But again, we don't know her circumstance at all. For all you know, she is putting in the 20 minutes.
That's doubtful. That's doubtful.
Anyway, I just thought it was interesting, the visceral reaction that it got from you because of knowing the background and whatever else. So we done?
I guess so. My little rant, I guess. Give you a little background.
We will throw something on the end of this that's kind of fun or interesting. Some sort of vlog. Enjoy your night.
So it's the next morning, and we talked about things last night till about 2 in the morning. And I think some people might say, like, what's the big deal? It's this tiny little scripted part.
15 seconds.
Like, what's the big whoop about it? And the big whoop is that the fact of who it is, and it's just very triggering. It literally flooded back all of the things of my childhood, all the stories of my childhood
Through that congregation.
And this congregation has a reputation in the circuit of being known for adultery. There's just so many cases of adultery. And I think the reason why I was triggered also when I said, like, this is who you picked her. I don't want to be accusational and say that she committed the adultery in the relationship or that there was a situation like that in the relationship. All I'm saying is a lot of people that, and in their head, like the scripture says in Hebrews, God will judge fornicators and adulterers. But still people will do things like get tired of their spouse, and then they will meet somebody else, commit adultery, even among witnesses in the congregation, and then they're like, well, we'll just take our discipline, get disfellowshipped.
Spend our 6-8 months out.
Yep, or however long it is, and we'll just come back and things will be fine. And a lot of times things are not fine. people can hold grudges for a really long time because those people that have committed the adultery, they have hurt families, they have hurt people. And if there are children involved, like so many cases, they have children already among their previous relationships, then they are also affected. And so it's just the frustration of all these families that I know who have had their lives ripped apart because of cheating, because of adultery.
So basically, you're saying that there's going to be grudges involved in that.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So, I mean, isn't that the case with her? If, let's say that she was the victim in that case, and yet there are other dynamics that go on. Let's say it's her husband that committed the adultery, and there are other family members that are holding a grudge because of whatever circumstances developed that they're aware of that no one else is. Yet she couldn't tolerate that scrutiny, and then she leaves. Is kind of what you're saying there that happens.
Yeah.
And that would be, part of the consequences that perhaps go along with it, even if you're a victim, being that the family dynamics are the way they are. So I guess what I might ask is, just to play the other side of the coin, what about those that would say, well, you can't have it both ways, because so many times in, the XJW community, they'll talk about, disfellowshipping and, punishment, or it being a non-forgiving, about the whole idea of unconditional love, like love doesn't have conditions, which is a farce. Not to mention, we could talk about the 4 different types of love. We only have one word for it, love, but the same love you show your child is not the same love you show your wife. So there's no...
It better not be.
Right, you shouldn't be. But people would say there's really no forgiveness, so to speak. So what you're saying is kind of speaking of that, but you can't, people say, well, you can't have it both ways. You can't have a situation where, you're holding grudges and then also forgiveness. The scripture does say that, like you said, God will judge fornicators and adulterers, but still there have been families hurt, whatever else. So in other words, it's not your responsibility to judge. Yet in some cases there are, children that are maybe grown now, or just different dynamics that touch other people than just the two who have done the wrongdoing.
Yeah, and congregations that are made up of families are typically pretty tight because that's all they've got is each other. And so then when you're having problems like that, then it really starts to get emotionally, and it starts to tear families apart.
Right. So just go back to that point, because the two seem to be diametrically opposed. You can't have forgiveness and then have, well, there's consequences too, and there's going to be grudges. I mean, that's sort of a, well, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't type of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of people will talk about how, again, there's that lack of forgiveness in the congregation, grudge holding over sins. So how do you harmonize those two consequences?
That's a really hard one.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really hard one. And I'm grateful that nothing like that has happened in my family. I've just witnessed a lot of the things. I've just witnessed a lot of the things that have happened in other people's families. And it's just, I don't know. It's really hard. And I think what's frustrating is how fake people can be about it. And the way the dynamic of the culture of the congregation is, it's like I said about this last night with Sherry. It's amazing how if you have all of a sudden have a part on a convention, or you have a part in an assembly, or in this case a broadcast, people in that area in the circuit will see her on there and be like, hey, let's catch up, let's go do this together, and let's go do that together. And not because of any sort of situation other than the fact that she was raised up by the organization.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's frustrating for people also, because it's like, if you just play your cards just right in the organization, she can have all the friends she wants now.
Fake friends.
Fake friends, yeah.
But to bring it back, because we didn't address it, and that sort of addresses it a little bit.
I guess I'm talking about grudge holding. Those grudge holdings will disappear as soon as you're held up in the congregation, is what I'm saying.
But that doesn't answer the question of how you balance out the grudge holding with forgiveness. Well, I think that's where we come back to the core issues that we were talking about before, because you're just addressing the consequences. Again, putting out the fires after everything's destroyed. And it's like they talk about with elders, they should be smoke detectors, not firemen.
Yeah.
And by the way, we don't mean that elders should be going around sniffing everybody's butt for every fume that might catch fire, which is pretty much a lot of times what they do. What we mean is that when you're able to maintain your own authority in the congregation, but not Christ's, there's a major problem with losing touch with the weightier matters of the law. When you keep everyone chasing your tail of trivial new light, they're so busy with strengthening their own authority in the congregation with burdensome man-made rules, so much so that it prohibits an individual from being authentic, making people basically kind of double-souled, like we've talked about before. So this person creates this persona that they're able to do any number of things against Christ. Then you've become the Pharisees, just making people liable to Gehenna, because you're not focusing on, again, those weightier matters of the law. They're just sitting against Christ in order to maintain some trivial new light that really doesn't mean anything. So it's like they're not focusing on the right things anymore. The adultery's already happened. The fire's already burned. So it goes back to the core problem of the congregation in the first place. Not necessarily, has nothing to do with this girl in particular, but all of the problems that existed in the congregation in the first place.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we talked about was that idea, like what Jesus said, the kingdom of God is in your midst, or is in your heart. Some will say, like, it's within you.
Right.
And those principles of, I mean, you could even go back to the 10 Commandments on some of those principles with, you don't steal another man's wife, or you don't commit adultery, or you don't steal, or you don't, murder, all those things. And it's like, those are the things, and Jesus talked about those things on the Sermon on the Mount.
Right.
And if those things are in a person's heart, they don't need to be policed by men.
Right.
It's in their heart.
Right.
And that's the problem, is that people live such double lives, that second persona that you talk about. They on the show say one thing, but inwardly they think a totally different way.
And I will say that too, because witnesses will all bag on this quite a bit about the kingdom of God is in your heart. Like that's the only place it exists. And, Catholicism may kind of, or other religions, I should say, may lend to that the kingdom of God is only in your heart. Well, that would be wrong too. Jesus does speak of his government being a real government that will come. But what good does it do to have a law that I don't believe in, or I don't want to fulfill, or it's sort of like a speed limit law out in the middle of nowhere. If I think it's not beneficial, I'm not going to obey it. And so the law, I have to believe in my heart, if you will, my motivation, my seat of motivation, that the law is beneficial for me, or I'm not going to follow it. Even though it is an external law, the law has to be within me. Otherwise, I'm not going to follow it. And that's the problem. When all you do is you focus on things that are trivial, the real core principles of the law, they just get lost. And go ahead.
Well, and a person would know why those laws are in place.
Yeah.
They'd understand why speeding is the way that it is, or they'd understand. I mean, there's sometimes, it's kind of funny, but, when you're going through the mountains, sometimes it will say 45.
Yellow, and a yellow sign.
Well, that's just a recommendation.
That's right.
And so it's not a set stone speed limit.
And that's
but you will recognize that when you're going around the mountain, if you're going to take it at 80, you may not want to do that because it could be icy. It could
even
be,
though that is the speed limit, 80.
Through Montana, it
Right,
is.
yeah.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is that
I'm just saying that
principally speaking, you don't want to be flinging off the road.
Yep.
You don't want to be rolling your vehicle because you're taking the corner too sharp. You just recognize I should probably slow down.
Right. And that's, again, going back to that's the power of principle over law. Again, when people get out here, the speed limit's 65, yet it's flatter than a board. You can literally see for 20 miles. There's one spot where you can see the red light flashing. It's just a flashing stoplight, and you can see it for 20 miles, literally.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no problem during the day of seeing any deer that are out there, any obstacles, and you know what the road conditions like because you just traveled it 5 minutes ago when you went one direction, or an hour ago when you went one direction, and now you're coming back. There are circumstances where people will go, no, I'm not going 65, and they're doing 75,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever it is. So it's more based on principle as opposed to law. But Montana tried principle speed limits for a while, for example, where they had no speed limit. You could, I think it was whatever you judged to be prudent. Well, the problem is you'd have a Corvette going, 140, and then you'd have some guy in his Vega or his Pinto trying to do 140, and it's like
not wise.
It's not wise and prudent, So, the overestimation of ability, or not even using common sense, if you would, sort of goes out the window a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what Christ wanted to train. He didn't want a bunch of law-bound drones. That's what the law was, and that's what the law of the Christ replaced. And we talked about this before in a previous video. The elders want to turn those principles into laws of their own. And it's like I went to them and talked about some of those things. Oh, well, that's a conscience matter. And it's like, okay, so why are you maintaining it as a law? For instance, chaperones.
Yeah.
They're watching Disney because it's not a law that you can't watch magic. And yet I say, well, I'm not going to watch those things. And yet you're enforcing upon me a different principle that I have to obey as a law. In chaperones, for example. Where are all these, and I asked this several times, is there a place where these things are written down so that I can learn them?
Like there's a list somewhere?
And they'd never answer me, of course. Doesn't mean they weren't going to enforce whatever principle they wanted to enforce on you at the time. It's the same thing of, you need to trim your beard. Here's the principle. Or you need to wear your skirt a little bit longer. Here's the principle to have modest dress and grooming, and we'll decide what's modest dress and grooming.
In fact, we've got a color page pamphlet to prove this.
That's right, with illustrative drawings for you to understand the law of the principle. Yeah. So it's focusing on those trivial things and not training a man's conscience. I'm trying to think of the scripture, just popped in my head and then it's gone again. Maybe by the time we edit it, we'll have it up in the screen there. But they lose track of an individual being able to train their conscience so that way they understand through use. Their perceptive powers trained through use. That's the scripture.
Yeah. They're all worried about modesty. Well, all those trivial things like you talk about, but yet they're not helping people with helping people. The scriptures is what helps people if they'd apply it. But they just micromanage people's lives.
Again, so busy being concerned with their own authority that they forget the weightier matters of Christ's authority. So they'll harp on you in your dress and grooming. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, you could be having an adulterous relationship. Mm-hmm. They're totally obsessed with the gnat. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, someone's gulping down the camel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So maybe that's expresses why such a little, quite honestly, scripted, 15-second, trivial propaganda declaration, this little 15-second clip, why it triggered such a visceral reaction.
Yeah. And again, like I said, knowing all her family and knowing all the dirt in that family.
And the congregation.
And then, by extension, the congregation. I mean, if they just follow the Bible, that'd be the game changer, you know?
Right. And maybe we'll go through that book just to see if they actually do what they say they're going to do in that, which is give attention to the Bible. And you know what? I almost suspect that they do. Because in the beginning, that's the way it turns out. However, once you're dunkified,
then they turn
that's the game changer. That's the game changer.
Yeah, they lie. They absolutely will lie. All the things that are done before baptism is now, they just own your life. They just own your life.
Yeah, they turn it on its head. That's the game changer. Anyway, enjoy our next vlog.
She wants another cereal bar. She wants her own. She loves cereal bars. It's like better than dog treats for her. She's a sweet tooth.
I'll pick one.
Okay. So that face. Okay, that's enough. Little stinker.
Okay, sorry for the no video. We've been going absolutely non-stop, so fueling up is our only opportunity. But here's the 36 Ford. It runs and drives, drove it right up there. But like I say, had a bunch of other stuff, and among yakking and whatever else, we got some 36 Ford car fenders, 2 of them, and then a bunch of 37 to 39 40 Ford fenders. And he had a couple of Chevy parts there, which we'll utilize and sell. And we got the grill and the hood with it, and a truck radiator shell, because there's a car radiator in it right now. Then we go to the second guy, who happened to have truck radiators, or excuse me, truck fenders, pickup truck fenders for a 36 Ford. So we get there, and he happened to have those, and he had a drive shaft for one, and a rear end for one, and some running boards, and some other stuff. And then it was like off to Menards to pick up some storm barrier, ice and water, leak shield, whatever you want to call it, for our roof when we start that. So it's been non-stop. Now we are on our way to pick up a base burner stove. So it's been quite the adventure, and Tiffany has finally gotten the opportunity to pee.
It's been like 6 hours since I felt the urge for my bladder to be released.
So it's been a non-stop run. Oh, and he had this. This is an old tow truck crank, hand crank. So probably from the T or the A era.
I bet you that would go well with that arm that we have in the back of that one truck.
Maybe, but I think that might be after that era. That arm, we've got a 40s tow arm. Anyway. Off and running again.
Okay. We showed up at a new place today. This place is really neat. We came to get this stove.
That's a pretty good sized stove.
That's huge. That's what, 7 feet, huh? You're 6 feet.
Pretty close.
It's hard to get the whole thing in there. It's really pretty though. It's a round oak. I don't know what we're gonna do with it. Oh really?
Yeah, it's broke.
Oh well. I'm sure you can do that.
Yeah. Wonder how the fire pot is. And we got a break here too. That sucks. But overall, not too bad. Should be able to find another one of these pretty easy. One broken one ain't too bad.
There's a few holes in it, looks like.
Well, that's easy. That's the tin.
Yeah.
It's the fire pot that's the big deal. The Flower pot seems good.
It's got a little missing chunk out of the back right there too.
Oh boy.
We're gonna have to empty that out, huh?
I don't know, that's gonna be heavy.
It's full of, oops, sorry. Full of garbage. Yeah, that's gonna be. We don't have a dolly or anything, do we? Because I thought we'd just take it apart, or this is gonna take some time.
A little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. It's a pretty cool property though. I don't know how many acres are here. I don't know if it's still for sale or if it's sold, but there's like all these buildings on here, and he's got all kinds of stuff lined for sale, and of course the house. And there's a building back there too. It's pretty neat, but we're gonna have to figure this out. That should be fun. I gotta get some gloves on.
68 on the other end.
Here's your goat GTO barn finds, huh?
I traded a snow can for $125 for that car. Yeah.
Those were the days.
It was sitting on the bridge. Okay. Okay, hold it. No, they're for sale yet. There's the two left. The rest are all sold.
Which two are still available?
That red 68 right next to you, right to the south of you there.
Okay.
Stands there.
Yep.
That was a loaded 68. It had front factory turning lights in it like a Cadillac. It had disc brakes, air conditioning, hood jack, full gauge back, power buckets, rear defogger, power trunk release.
How much is that?
What's that?
How much is that?
I don't know where the boys got that big price. They took my price sheet that I wrote up for them, and I can sure find out. It's red down there, the side there. But see, this is paper. So all the slot.
What's the other one for sale?
This yellow one down here.
Okay.
I think these 266 are still available, but not much left over.
Mm-hmm.
The boys, I think, are claim to one, I guess. On the other side, there's 68.
This one?
Oh, that's 69. Well, I got a 69. It's one of three ever built from Pontiac. The page code says that it was a judge, but it was built a month and a half before any judges were known to exist.
And what's that one?
It's a 69 GTO.
And that's down there?
No, that's in the body shop.
Okay.
It's off the frame, it's just a cab sitting in there now. I was gonna restore it and
And this one is, what year is this one?
it's 68.
Okay. And you'd have to see your price sheet to.
Yeah, I think this one, with everything with it, it's got the motor and tranny and everything. I think it was right around $8,000.
What motor was
They
in?
went all the way, I sold two convertibles to,
What motor's in this?
400.
400.
That's all they came with in 68. Just different versions of it.
Right. Cool. The guy that first bought it, what you said was from what, Edinburgh?
Edinburgh. And it lived most of its life up there after he came back from Minneapolis. But down in Minneapolis, it was known as the Hemi Killer. It was blowing the doors off all the Hemi Cudas and Challengers and stuff, and they couldn't figure it out.
So what motor was in this then?
Well, as near as we can tell, by putting things together, is it was the gal that owned the Noka Pontiac put a Ram 5 over the counter motor together.
And what would that be? I don't understand what that is. So
It was a 400 cubic inch, 536 stock horsepower. No wonder it was beating up on the Hemis.
no kidding. So that would make this a pretty rare car then.
Yeah.
Do you have the motor or
hence
anything
the
with it?
price on it.
Yeah. Do you have any motor with or anything?
I've got some bits and pieces of Ram 5 stuff. Those guys from Utah, they've got a complete one. That's why they were really hot to get this thing. But that's why they wanted to put it in their museum down there.
Right. So it would have been the same as a Judge, but just too early.
Yep. Paint coat is the same as the carousel. It's a carousel red, which was a Firebird only color in '69.
Okay.
But you could, well, I don't know if you can still read it or not. So I could show pictures of it. Right here in factory chalk writing. It says special. It crossed out the B for the paint code and wrote special orange.
I'm gonna turn my light on and see that.
See if it'll pick it up. Yeah, you can kind of see the special, and then here's orange down here.
Huh.
That's factory chalk writing.
Really?
Yep.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Monte Carlo hood.
So with that floor like that, was that hog barn too?
Yep, this was one of their feed. The feed was all auger all along here, so it dropped it into the chutes, and then they could crap in here, and it was all stalled off. I've cut a lot of the stalls. Same way with that. That was a farrowing. That was the farrowing barn there. When we first got here, that was all panned off.
So, anyone wondering what it takes to restore an old stove? This is where it starts. I don't know if you can see that or not. Chipping this crap out with this big bar because the stuff is absolutely settled in there and packed. And it packs into sediment layers after years, and it's like a rock. I mean, and I'm nailing that with that bar. I've been chipping at this for an hour, and it was filled up to about where you can see the line where that hole is. Sorry, my camera's fuzzy. And I've pulled anything and everything out of this thing. Steel, ball joints, a U-joint. People will, why do you think that's gonna burn? Anyway, this is all soft now because I've been chipping at it. But if I give that a good stab, that's only with one hand, but I'm trying to punch a hole in the side. But it's a nightmare. That's where it begins. Very difficult going here. So finally, after a couple hours of this, I'm starting to see the light. I got a hole through, and you can kind of see the grate down there. It's just slow going, chip, 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 chip. And for those of you who may say, yeah, it's cold out, it's frozen. That's what the problem is. No, it's not. I've got a torch here. I've torched it for a couple hours. I even took a big soldering thing that's about 12 inches long. Drilled a hole in it with the drill. Stuck that down in there for a couple hours before I even started. And even right around it, it didn't matter at all. It's just packed in there. But I did put the torch in underneath of it and right through the holes and tried heating it up under there for a while. Again, no difference. I took the torch and off of a piece and tried to heat it up. Nope, it's a brick. But when I did have the torch under there, it was smelling like oil, so I'm pretty sure that's Another reason why it's packed in so hard is that they were burning oil on top of it too, which seeps in, and once it is not hot anymore, it dries like a brick and then gets cold like a brick, and then they start a fire on top of it, never permeates, and you do that over and over and over again. Ugh. Anyway, it was definitely in the shop because there was, like I said, U-joints, ball joints, anything you could imagine was pulled out of there, and it took 4 of us to lift that thing up, and I think I hurt my back doing it. But it was a heavy bugger with all that crap in there. But we're slowly making progress. Finally. Starting to get dark, but finally, I think this will be the last big chunk. And in fact, the biggest chunk I've pulled out yet. And all that crap packed in there is probably what actually saved the fire pot, because usually these fire pots are cracked. This one's in great shape all the way around. I just had to be really careful not to break it myself while I'm chiseling this crap out of here with this big bar. But looks like we're exposed. The shaker looks decent. Let's see. Pull that out. That's broke, but I probably broke that. Maybe not. Looks like it's been broke a while. Maybe these should have a turn shaker, I think. I don't know. There's different styles. This is a round oak. I've got several round oaks, but not one like this. Now I'm gonna finish cleaning this out. I was able to get the bottom open, so I should be able to shovel that out of there too. I sprayed it all down with oil really good, or lube, whatever, and then torched it. And the bottom's totally packed in too. So I got my torch under there and it's blowing out nice and wide and burning plastic and oil and whatever else probably out the bottom. But it was frozen in there with the oil and whatever else baked in, froze in everything. So breaking that apart and getting it out now.